Hi there, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Apologies, there was no intro music. It seems to have disappeared. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. This is Fireside Chat 116. And apologies also earlier, I had pre-programmed my reminder, and unfortunately it was programmed for tomorrow. And then I realized it just a while back. I will start as I usually do with a prayer for peace. Gamara Shiakon a Fudna Krinya. Gamara Shiakon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha. Gunairi Lin ar Kajgarmaka, Galmij Buikas Jeev, Jeha Quivdaka is Spirit Quivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters, that the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where you're all from. Great. From Washington, hi Lisa, West Cornwall, Penzance. I was there last week, a wonderful place. Yes, Fernie had a wonderful summer gathering last week, and then I spent a few days in Cornwall and had a wonderful time because I had never been further south than Tintagel. So to go down to Penzance, St. Michael's Mount, visiting wonderful sacred sites, and a theatre performance at Minack Theatre, that's an outdoor theatre on the cliffs. It was absolutely wonderful. So hi Julia from London, Sussex, Scotland. Hi everyone from a sticky and humid Ballina, Kidaloo, Cork, the interior of British Columbia, the land of the midnight sun. Oh yes, I wonder, are you getting any sleep at all in Finland? Wonderful. North London. Anyway, wonderful to be back. Great. So we are going to, let's see where we're going. Where are we going? We're going to Wales. And let me introduce my guest this evening, Fee Ware. You're so welcome, Fee.
Thanks, Eamon. Hello, everybody.
So we've got a few more people from June gloom. I don't know what that means, Gloria, in Southern California, whether it's lots of rain, maybe. New Jersey, USA, Slough, sunny Slough, hi John, and Oklahoma. Brilliant. So what's it like in Wales today, Fiona, Fee?
Unusually, it's very sunny and very hot. Normally I'd probably be telling you I couldn't see the hills for the drizzle, but we've had about 5 weeks of really hot, dry weather.
So what part of what part of Wales are you?
Actually just on the Llyn Peninsula, which is the little finger of land that points across the Irish Sea to you. And I'm not on the thin end where Bardsey is. I'm the other end, the thick end of the Llyn Peninsula.
And you know how it gets its name?
Go on, tell me.
From the E-Lion, the Leinster, the tribes of Leinster used to go on raids and they colonized. I just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah.
So what's it like?
Sorry.
What's it like there?
It's lovely. The area we live in is actually very rural, as opposed to the sort of further across where it's lots of slate quarries and mining and that. Here it was mostly agricultural. So we live on the side of Mynydd Cennin, which is Cennin Mountain. But like most Welsh mountains, it's actually just a small hill. But it's a nice small round hill, and the house faces southeast, and we're about 4 miles away from Cardigan Bay in one direction, and then about 4 miles away from the Menai Straits in the other direction. So it's a nice setting, and we can see Snowdonia across 180-degree view. So see the Rhinogs and Cadaridris. Very nice.
And do you have any special kind of sacred sites near you on the Llŷn Peninsula?
Oh, well, you can't really move in Wales without tripping over a sacred site. It's a bit like Ireland, or Cornwall. I think we've got a standing stone just along the road.
Mm-hmm.
We have a holy well for Saint Gubby down the road. It's a beautiful place. And then there's lots of history here. There's a Roman fort just across the road. I can see that from the window. An interesting thing is that just down the road from us, about a mile in the Victorian times, they actually found a Bronze Age lunula, a gold sticking out of a bog. The farmer thought it was a laurel leaf. And then he must have had a thought about it because there's no laurels around here. And he'd gone back to look at it and pulled it out. And it's this beautiful necklace.
Wow.
And that's in the museum in Cardiff. Very nice. But that's Bronze Age. But just last week in the garden, I was in the vegetable patch and something caught my eye. And it was actually a Neolithic flint. So it's literally under our feet all the time.
That's wonderful. You mentioned a Saint Gubby. Saint
Gubby, yeah.
Is that the short for?
It's Cybbi, and it's his. Well, the holy one is at Clan Gubby, which is the clan is the term for ecclesiastical enclosure. So you get a lot of clans in Wales. Clan did know.
Okay.
Yeah. So when he was there, it probably was just a spring, but over time they built a little. They lined it. And they built a little building next door where you could go and rest before you went in it to get healed. And it was famous for having an eel. And the girls used to go down with the hankies and put the hankies in. And if the eel touched it, or there was lots of little folklore tales about it. I'm going to have a cough now to make like I explain to everybody that not only do I suffer from hay fever, that my grandson has given me a terrible cold. So I've got a double whammy.
So if the eel touches your hanky, what happens?
No, if the eel touches your feet.
Oh.
Yeah, or if your hanky flows in a particular direction, but the direction it flows in is actually the way the water runs. So that's a bit of a con, really, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It would be very unusual to go the other way.
So if the eel touches your feet, what does it mean?
I think it's that you'll be healed. It's a good sign. It's a good sign.
Wow. Is the eel still there, or is that from the past?
I don't think so, no. I've never seen one.
Okay. That's fascinating. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's lots of holy wells, which is... Right. Lots of holy wells around here, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, brilliant. And how long are you living there? Are you there? You're not from Wales, no?
No. My voice is going to give out, but I'll carry on. I was born in Cheshire, born and raised in Cheshire, and lived there all my life. Oh dear. But was very keen on Wales. For some reason, I told the vicar, who was Welsh, that I wanted to learn Welsh when I was about 4 years old. A very peculiar child. Anyway, Steve, my husband, every time you hear me say Steve, it'll be my husband I'm referring to. He had an aunt and uncle that lived in the Conwy Valley at Llanrwst, in a little house on the side of a hill, looking up the valley. And we used to love going there with the children. And it made a big impression on me. And then I met this druid at a summer gathering who lived in Wales, of course, it's Carol. So I used to come over and visit her very often. And I really wanted to get away from Cheshire. It was very built up and getting worse and busy. So I started sending Steve pictures of cottages in Wales as a bit of a joke. And this went on for about a year. And he didn't take the bait at all. It was too soon. He wasn't ready to retire, etc., etc. So I just left it. Anyway, one day he rang up and said, it's a Sunday because he works funny shifts. And he says, I'm really fed up of work. I'm sick of it here. It's awful. I really think we should start looking in earnest. So I thought, brilliant, great. So onto the computer the next time we were together. And we were flicking through the houses. And I saw a picture of one. I said, just, hang on. I know that house. And I'd been over to stay with Carol about a couple of months before. And when we stay with Carol, I drive and we go out on an adventure for the day. So that day's adventure was to go to Llangibby, to the well. So off we set. And what normally happens on these trips is that we talk so much that Carol either forgets to give me the directions or I don't hear it. We always go wrong. It's traditional, the other thing that's traditional is the Druid tea, the tea and the cake. But
Yes.
so this time off we go up the side of the hill, and I missed a turning. And I think to myself, well, the little windy Welsh lanes, I'm not going to turn around. We'll carry on. The road's bound to come back at some point. So carry on up the hill, and we turn left. And I remember looking across, going past a little house and looking at the view and thinking, oh my God, what a fantastic place to live. And this was the house come on the market 2 months later. And so I said, I know this house. And within 4 days, we'd viewed it, made an offer and had it accepted. And that was it. It was our house. And then I found out.
Go on.
I found out from oh well, this is going to be so annoying. I found out from a Welsh friend later that this little round hill is the last place that the Tulwith Teg, the Welsh fairies, were seen in Gwynedd. So it all sort of was very goose pimply and it fitted together wonderfully. So there we are. And here I am. And I'm a lucky person because this sounds a bit horrible, doesn't it? But my husband works shifts and he works away. So he's here for 5 days and then he's gone. So I have, this space to myself, which I really, really like, Fantastic.
To get back to the Tulwith Teg, it's the place where they were last seen. Is there a story about that?
Unfortunately, he didn't tell me any stories about it, but it's very reliable. So I expect it's true. My friend up the road, I've got 2 neighbours. One's about a quarter of a mile that way, and the other's a mile that way. And the young lady who's a mile away goes up to the top of the Minnoth very often. And at the top there's a trig point, and she says it's full of spirits up there. She has a gift of seeing, I don't, so she sees them all around.
So for our viewers who may not know what we're talking about, the Tulwith Teg, just to explain what they are. Or who they are.
Well, the fairies, I suppose, is the easiest way to describe them. They're the Welsh fairies, the fair folk, the good folk.
Now, and where did they come from?
Do you mean, are you asking me generally where I think fairies come from? Is that what you'd like to know?
In Ireland, they say, well, who are the fairies? Well, they're maybe the Tuatha Dan that had to go under the ground when the Sons of Mill came, or that kind of thing. So what's the belief about the...
I don't know what the Welsh believe. I'm very, very ignorant. So
one interesting one is that some of them are the souls of the Druids that were killed on Asman, and I don't know if you've heard that.
No, I think I have heard that somewhere. I also heard that there was a folklore on the Llyn that a person became acquainted with the Tulwith Teg, and he wanted to know where they came from. He wanted to see their homeland, and so the fairy told him to stand on his foot. So he stood on his foot, and then suddenly you could see in the clefts the little towns and the fields and the rivers running down to the ocean. So you have to stand on a fairy's foot.
That's brilliant.
And there's also another local legend about a fairy midwife. And this lady was a midwife that tended to humans. And she had a knock on the door. And it was a very strange man asking for help. His wife was giving birth and having trouble. So she said yes, and she got all the things together. And they got on the back of the horse and they rode off. And they arrived at a cave, and in the back of the cave was this woman in labour. And he says to her, you do your job, but here's a little pot of ointment. And when the baby's delivered, I want you to smear a little bit of ointment on each eye. She says, oh, right, fine. So she carried on delivering this baby in this mucky old cave with all the leaves blowing about and the dirt and everything. And the baby arrives, and it's born bonny, and it's all she sorted out. She smears the ointment on one eye and on the other eye, and as she's doing that, she's busy and sweating. She's been working. She just moves some hair away from her face, and she just catches her eyelid. And suddenly she looks, and all the cave's full of gold and drapery, and it's beautiful. And so she's a bit in awe. But then the guy comes out, and she says he gives her a sack of gold and takes her home, and she doesn't say anything about it. Anyway, a couple of months later, she's down to the local market, going around all the stores and everything, and she sees the gentleman, and she goes up to him and she says, "Oh, how's your wife? How's the baby? How's everything going?" And he looks at her and he says, "Which eye can you see me out of?" And she goes, "Oh, well, it's this eye." So he takes his finger and he pokes at it. You know, she's in fairy business, and she paid the price. You know, and just so that's another
that story. I've heard that story, and I think I've heard an Irish version of it, but it's a really interesting one. Yeah, it's a brilliant story, though. Absolutely. So you have a particular interest in fairies, because I know you led I don't know how many years ago it was, one of the Druid Gorsets. We were up in Derbyshire. So tell us what you did during COVID.
Right. Well, during COVID, my life didn't really change very much, because I live on the side of a hill, and I don't go into town apart from once a fortnight to get the shopping, unless there's something really great going on. So life didn't really change for me, apart from the fact I had Steve home all the time, which is, you know, a bit of a trial. You've got to get used to that after a bit. You can see why people whose husbands retire get a bit crabby, but there you go. So I thought, oh, you know, what can I do? And people were feeling fed up. Like back then, they couldn't go out anywhere, they couldn't do anything, you know. So I thought, I'll do something, but I didn't want to do anything electronical. I didn't want to do anything on social media or anything like that, because I had written a blog for donkey's years, and I was just over that a bit. So I thought, I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something I can send in the post, because everybody likes getting stuff through the post. And you don't these days, do you? You only get sort of pizza adverts and stuff, you know. So I decided to start a little newsletter, and I thought, what can I do it about? I thought, well, everybody's always asking me, you know, what do I know about fairy? What do I do with fairies? I'm going to do it about fairies. And I told Steve, he says, "Oh, you'll never keep it up." So I said, "No, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it for a year." So every month at New Moon, I sent out a little fairy newsletter called Feast Fairy Ring. And I've got an example here. You can see Feast Fairy Ring. And it's just like a little newsletter with pictures. It's got pictures and poems. I give them, the people that joined in got an invitation, because the fairies are very insistent that they have a proper invitation with scroll work and glitter and everything on it. So they got one of those as well. Not everybody joined in, but a lot did, and we had little challenges. We had to do things. But the focus of it was what I do with fairy. And what I do with fairy is just everyday magic. So the byline is exploring everyday magic together. So we just had some very fun 12 months.
Can you give us an example of that everyday magic?
The everyday magic? Well, yeah. Everyday magic. I don't mean, when I say magic, I don't necessarily mean I'm going to go out and have a ritual, or I'm going to go to my altar and say a huge prayer, or I'm going to do this, that, and the other. To me, everyday magic is, well, I'll tell you what my practice is, shall I? Shall I tell you what I do when I get up? I get up, and I go downstairs and make a cup of tea. I used to let the dog out, but he's passed, unfortunately. So make a cup of tea. Always open the front door. Always go outside, and I will say hello to the sun. I've got a little rhyme that I say to the sun if he's up, and if the moon's around, there's a little rhyme I say to the moon. And if she's not around, then I'll wait till later on when I can catch her. And if I can't see her because it's drizzly, then I will say it anyway, and at some point. And then I will say good morning to the house and the land and the animals and all the guys that you can't see and I can't see that are around me that help out. And that's one, you know, that's part of my magic. And then I will just look at the view. And most of my day is spent looking at the view, or watching the grass grow, or watching the clouds go over, or seeing the little tinkly bits of dews in the meadow, or looking what the calves are doing, or, oh gosh, there's a hare, there's a barn owl out, you know, blimey, was that a lizard I really saw? You know, all that sort of stuff to me is magic. I mean, just doing things around the house is magic. So That's my practice. I do have altars and I do rituals, but I'm very, I suppose you might call me a lazy druid. I don't know, but I'm very sort of simple in my approach.
What comes, what comes to mind is how accessible your Druidry is. And it's about being able to find the magic in the mundane. And that was one of the teachings I learned on my shamanic study, was like finding the extraordinary within the ordinary. It's not about, flying to the moon and riding 20 unicorns. It's about that. Seeing the little dewdrops in the leaves or in the grass. Is that a hare or is it a bunny? Those kind of things. And really interesting about greeting the house, and then the spirits that are all around the seen and the unseen. Well, you say you don't see them, so you know they're there. But I think that's very, very rich, because it's always there. So if you have a ritual, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's it, over. Where with what you're doing, and that is also important, is that it's that constant communication, or that awareness. It's that you've set the scene for the day, and it's there. You've acknowledged everyone, or you've acknowledged every entity or every being, and there's such magic in that, because they're with you then, because you've acknowledged them.
Well, that's it. It's just when people say, what do you do when you work with fairy? Well, I don't do huge things. I just acknowledge them, and they acknowledge me. So it's just a conversation, a continual conversation, almost. So
I think
there's very different ways of working with fairy, and it's quite. I find people really interesting, and I find the way they do things fascinating, and the way the fairy has sort of, well, things go in stages, don't they? And then there's unicorns and dolphins. You can see it with tarot packs. Normally they start with the ordinary tarot pack, and then you get they go work, but wonderfully balmy. It's great. Anyway, and there's all sort of different people that work with fairy, from the people that like all the twinkly stuff, to people that like the kings and queens, and stuff like that. And I just like the ordinary ones.
Yes. Philosophical Phoenix here says, completely agree about everyday magic. It's what I miss most in an urban setting. Now, having said that, I think you can find magic in an urban setting.
I mean, where I lived before, I was still doing the same things I'm doing now. And I was on a housing estate, so you can find little touches.
You can find the dew in the grass, or what always fascinates me, in a crack in the pavement when you see a flower, or, a derelict space between two buildings and you see the buddleia tree with butterflies on it. And that finding those little or urban foxes, I've seen more foxes in Dublin than I see here, because it's so vast here, because I'm in the country. I don't see them occasionally, but so many times I'm driving through the city and a fox will pass by. Julia says, I find it easier to find magic in urban, as there are not as many wonderful things to distract you from it, i.e. they stand out. And that's an interesting one. That, yes, that you're able to spot them. That little gem in between the concrete. I think that's lovely. John King says, I have an Irish brother-in-law, and he would always talk of greeting the day. Yeah. And somebody says, David Boyle, I'm off to the Three Wishes Fairy Festival tomorrow. Where is that, David? Do you know about that? The Three Wishes Fairy Festival. I don't even know what country it's in.
Down south somewhere, I think.
Sorry?
There is a fairy festival in the UK, but it's normally down south somewhere.
Okay. It's just, it's so, with all your magic, what brought you to, I mean, you were always into fairies, but what brought you to
I wasn't always into fairies at all. I used to be terrified of them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So how did you move from being terrified of them to engaging with them?
Right. Well, when we were growing up, my mum used to use sort of things, to terrify you, to make you behave, basically. One of the things that the parents used to use in Cheshire was Ginny Greenteeth. Have you heard of her?
I've heard
Ginny
of her.
Is a water spirit.
Yeah.
A water spirit who has very, very sharp fangs and very sharp fingernails and very long green hair and green skin. And she lives in water that's got lots of weeds in it. So if you went near the water, Ginny Greenteeth would come out and snatch you and tangle you in the weeds and drag you under, But my mum was very effective with that, because I really, And the other thing we had in our house, which my mum's still living in now, she still lives in that house, she's 92, was Icky. Now, Icky was the boggart or the brownie or whatever you would describe as the thing that was responsible for all the mishaps in the house, or things going missing. And the house does had and does have a really weird atmosphere at times, and things happen that even I can see, so that was very scary. And so that sort of frightened me off, sort of opening up my psychic channels, should you say. And the idea of doing anything with fairy. Did you used to have Rupert the Bear books?
Yes. I didn't have, but I know of them. I didn't have them.
If you don't live in the UK, there's back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, used to be Rupert Bear. I think he's actually been on television since, but there were little annuals with cartoon tales in them. And then all the different animals in the little clothes and everything having adventures. But one of the characters in there was called Raggedy. And Raggedy was this horrible, nasty, vindictive little twig person with shorts and a t-shirt on. And he absolutely terrified me. And that, for me, epitomised nature spirits, fairies, this Raggedy thing, after you, causing havoc. And so I wasn't really very keen on fairies. But when I was going through the Druid courses, one of my friends organised a Hawthorn Day in Hebden Bridge with a lovely lady called Sue, and we had a whole day communing with Hawthorn and learning all about it, and having Hawthorn leather and Hawthorn tea and meditating under a Hawthorn. And at the end of the day, we came back and we had a big journey to the Spirit of Hawthorn and conversation. So off I went to see the Spirit of Hawthorn, and I had a really good journey. And I met this beautiful hawthorn lady, I suppose, in this big hawthorn grove that was just revolving with blossoms and berries just sort of continually. And she gave me a task. I thought, oh, what's this then? So she says, I want you to go out and photo all the hawthorn trees in your neighbourhood. So I thought, right then, okay. But then, you know what human nature's like, don't you? You think, oh, there's a hawthorn tree. We're walking the dogs. There's a hawthorn tree. Look how old that one is. I really must come back and take a photo of it. And then go to the next one. Look at this twisty one, and look at this one holding hands with the tree next door. So I was going around looking at all these trees. And then I started to realise that they were disappearing. I'd go past the garden and then the hawthorn tree was gone. And then I'd do somewhere else and that hawthorn tree had gone. And then, and that hawthorn tree had gone. And I was thinking about it and I was thinking, well, is it, I didn't take photos, what's happening. Then I realised, I think the whole point of it was if I hadn't been looking at those trees thinking, I must come back and take a photo, then I would never have realised that they'd gone, probably. Okay. And I just thought, well, yeah, my attention is now drawn to the fact that, that nothing is safe really. And, I don't get me started on people taking trees down, because I really think you ought to have a license for anything over 20 foot, I think,
yeah.
And all your neighbours have to agree and all sorts. We drove our neighbours crazy there because we let everything in our garden grow, and he hated it and he used to chop off his side of it, so it's just ridiculous. Anyway, so that sort of changed my attitude a bit to fairy. So I started to work with them a little bit. I'd go, and talk to them down the bottom of the garden, because your fairies are always down the bottom of the garden, aren't they? So I had to, and my circle was actually down the bottom of the garden. My druidic circle was down there. And but I would never go down after dark. Never. I was too scared. I sound like a right wuss. I'm not at all like this now. Anyway, I would never be down in the dark. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do this properly, I'm going to have to get over this. I'm going to have to go. So I made a fairy altar at the bottom of the oak tree. There's a lovely huge oak tree at the bottom, just by the circle. So I made a little fairy altar. And I thought, well, I'm going to go down in the dark and do it. And I did do it, and I got over my fear and everything. And that's when I started sort of, sort of conversing with them and that. So, yeah. So that's how it started. And that's how I got over my fear, just actually opening myself up to the process of realizing that they're not all raggeties or...
That's right. It's interesting. Gabriella here. Hi, Gabriella. Gabriella was at the gathering or the weekend before last. I've met fairies in midsummer before joining Druidry, and while being ungrounded, it did scare me because there were several. I felt their vibe, and it was so very different than one of a human. They seemed very happy to be out and about, and also very happy we interact. But I got, what did she say? I got so scared. Yeah, I think it's and now I'm rather cautious of the unkind folks. I suppose it's, yeah, I mean, we get lots of stories about, don't piss them off, don't do this, don't do that. Yeah. My relationship is, this thing, they're amoral and they just do what they do. I have them in my garden, and my relationship is a benign one. And I do my best not, I'm very aware you wouldn't cut down a tree, or there's loads of sacred sites that are dedicated to them, etc. But I remember one experience. I don't see them, but I've smelt them. I've been in woods, and I was taking my healer friend Shaban from Tanzania. We were in the woods of friends, and they were all hawthorn trees. And the kids took us up, and they said it's the magic woods. So we're there, myself, Shaban. We're the only two adults, and the rest are my two kids and the kids on the farm. And one of the boys says, I could smell perfume, and I could smell it. And I said to Shaban, have you got something in your pocket? He goes, no. We could all smell this beautiful, sweet scent, and it wasn't hawthorn flowers, because it wasn't in. They weren't in bloom. They were finished. And I thought, I've heard that's before. And I was in Mullaghmore, which is a big hill. You talk about small mountains in Snowdonia or in Wales. It's the same in Ireland, but it's in the Burren, and it's an amazing sacred site. And I was up there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was in a grove of hawthorn trees and with somebody else. And I could smell roses, not hawthorn. We both smelt it, and I thought, okay, that is. Or I've seen flashing lights, and somebody else saw them. It wasn't just me, because when. Did I see a fairy? I want to, because I hope I did. And then often your desire to can color whether you do actually see it. And it's just fascinating. Gabriella says, in that day on midsummer, they came towards me and spoke to me, 4 of them in 2 hours, different ones. I gave them flowers and they were happy with that. Lovely. And Naomi says, my husband's grandfather saw the folk as a child on a rath near his family farm close to Callan. Oh, Callan, that's not problem. That's very close to me. I've seen it. We were in Markery Castle, is a castle in Sligo, and Howard and I were walking along the road, and it was a beech tree, and was not quite dusk, and I saw these flashing lights at the bottom, and I said, do you see those? Because it's like, it wasn't you, it wasn't the lights of a passing car, and he saw them. And I thought, what can it be? And I thought, okay, well, it's the shining ones. And John says, we had the grandchildren visit, and to keep them amused, they painted fairy doors. We set them into a rocky mound and took a photograph. Then we looked at the photograph. It was covered in orbs, and in each orb was a face. You see, how do you explain this? And I think it's I just think these are wonderful, these experiences, and for kids. Philippa says, that's interesting. I often smell a lovely perfume and glowing lights. I remember journeying and asking them why I can't see them directly, and they says, you don't need to. And then Liz says, I wonder if those afraid of fairies or have bad experience of people who always need to be in control. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Mine was just purely fear driven into me by my mother, so much who always wanted to be in control. So yeah, probably.
Yes. And Natasha says, my mother taught us to plant nasturtiums as the wee folk loved them, and to leave food out for them. I have been planting nasturtiums along with trees wherever I go. That's lovely. And the Michelle who's in me, there's a circle of hawthorn in the forest on the hill of Tara. Sometimes when walking past, it can feel a little unnerving, as if disturbing them. And other times you get the feeling that you're being observed, but safe to walk by. I mean, it's interesting. It's the same if you're walking by someone's house. You know, I'm always fascinated by people's gardens, and, I'm trying not to look in, and then I do. And, is that intrusive? And often people say, welcome, come and have a look. And others go, I don't want you looking in my garden. This is a private moment. And I wonder, is it the same with them as well? Poppy says, thanks for reminding me of the fairies. Poppy, do you have, and Poppy lives in Crete and sometimes in the UK. Do you have fairies in Crete? So, yeah. Anyway, so what brought you to Druidry? How did you find?
Right. This is going to be a long story.
Right.
Right. I was brought up in a family that were actively Church of England, which is Protestant religion. And my dad was a church warden, and both my mum and dad were Sunday school teachers. And his father had been a church warden, and then it was the Brownie Guide pack. They were attached to the church, and the amateur dramatic group that was attached to the church. So everything was sort of to do with the church. And I was quite into it, quite liked it. Went to school and was in the Christian Union, and I got sent off to meet all the other, representatives from schools at one weekend once. So I must have been pretty keen. And but then I really started to get fed up a bit with it, sort of in my late teens, because I really resented the fact that there was somebody at the front telling me what to do, and then that how they behave in church is not how they behave when they're out, and you hear all the stories about what they do, what they get up to and everything, and you think, what are they doing, And then I got to a point of, although I could connect, with the figure of Jesus, I couldn't connect with the figure of Jesus being in the Mediterranean, or and not here in the UK. And of course, at the same time, I started to develop my love of reading, and I would read anything, and so mostly things like history, Henry Treece, these are old authors, Rosemary Sutcliffe, and they had all sorts of old religions in them, because we were about the Celts, a lot of the Vikings, and then Alan Garner, who was a local author, but in a village about 5 miles away. I loved his books, and the thing about Alan Garner's books was that he actually wrote about places I knew, and he wrote about the magic in the places I knew. So I'd been up on Alderley Edge, and I knew, where the Sfalt Alpha were coming out of the mines, and and I knew where Shutlingslow was, and I could see, knew where it was on the skyline and everything, and I absolutely loved that, and it intrigued me. And I went on to, you read The Hobbit, don't you, and The Lord of the Rings and other fantasy books and everything. And I loved history and archaeology and all that sort of thing. But, that sort of, I stopped going to church, and that sort of was my background. And then I had the children, and I must have been in my late 20s when I suddenly got the urge to start seeking around for something. And that's coincided with the launch of the internet. Now, Steve was really geeky, and he started off with the ZX81 and worked his way up. So he was, abreast of the developments, really. And we were one of the first people, I suppose, to get internet in the home, as soon as it was available, the old dial-up. And, you go on the internet, it showed you what you could find on it. It was amazing. You could find all these different pagan, esoteric groups on there. I mean, in the olden days, you used to have to go to a dedicated esoteric bookshop, which were, hard to find, weren't they? Not on the high street, or you had to subscribe to a weird magazine and look at the little adverts in the back and write off to them. So this was fascinating to me, all this stuff, and I've obviously been reading the odd book I could pick up. We had a lovely little shop in the local village called the Medicine Wheel, and you had to go up the stairs inside. They had 2 or 3 treatment rooms, and then they had like a little bookshelf, and then they had all the smelly stuff and the crystals and everything. And I picked up a few books from there. Anyway, I thought, no, I really want to actually meet other people or get more involved in this. So I started looking around on the internet, and I came to the choice that there was 3 things I could do. The first one was I could look into Wicca. There was a coven or witchcraft. There was a coven nearby, and So I thought about this, and I thought about Steve, because I hadn't mentioned this to Steve, and I had 2 small children at the time, and I thought, well, they meet at night, and you know, and you might or might not have to get undressed, but you definitely would have to be, you know, it was unsociable hours, put it that way. There was no way I could say to Steve, you know, oh, we're just going out now, and you have got the kids. So I thought, well, no, I can't really do that. Then the other 2 were Druid groups, and one of them was the British Druid Order, run by Grey Wolf, and the other was the Order of Bards Ovates and Druids. Now, I was really, sorry, I really like the idea of the British Druid Order, because they were more shamanic, and that appealed to me more. But it was just at the time, you know, when Philip Shawcross lost his wife, and it sort of, you know, I wrote to him and didn't hear back at all. I heard back eventually about 5 years later, but didn't hear anything. So I decided to join OBOD, and that's how I became part of Druidry. And that must have been 1999, I think. And I saw in one of the first touchstones I got that there'd been a retreat on Iona. Yeah. And I thought, I want to go to Iona. Druids get to go to Iona on retreat, so I need to be a Druid. And I thought, well, you know, so I was quite determined to get to the end of the Druid Grey, but they've not been back since. So I'm gonna have to just take myself now. But yeah.
Iona's beautiful. I was there twice. It's well worth visiting. Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to go. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they had, 2 years in a row. I mean, I wasn't on the retreat in Iona, but they were, I think they had 2 retreats in Iona, or a few for a few years. Some of them back to back. They were so popular.
Yes, yeah. Like Carol went on one, and that was one of the back to back ones, I think she went on.
Yeah. So people still talk about them. So
yeah, true.
So did you join the BDO as well, the British Druid Order, anyway? Because there's some people who are members of both.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't in the end. I think funds were the problem in those days, because I was still at home with the children. I think I might have just been starting to work, and I couldn't justify, you know, sloughing off some of the family money to join too. I didn't tell Steve I was in it anyway for about 9 months. I did it all secretly. And then I decided I wanted to go to the gathering and meet, and because the gathering sounded really great. So I thought, how am I going to sort of break it to him about going to the gathering? Because in those days, I hated long distance driving, and I really hated motorways. I was a right wimp when I was younger. Anyway, so I thought, you know, someone's got to drive me. It's going to have to be Steve. How do I sell him this? And I was working at the time then. So I saved up and said to him, how would you fancy going down to Glastonbury for a nice break? I'd like to go to this, and I'll pay for everything, and then we'll go down together. And he's, you know, I don't know what I was worried about. You know, of course he wanted to come, and for quite a few years, he used to get an all expenses trip down to Glastonbury. You know, and that was it. You know,
and he still
slowly started getting more involved. I found a local grove. I was an ovate by the time I found a local grove. It wasn't that local, actually. It was about 2 hours away, but, you know, I went for a few times.
Brilliant. Black Duncan, Ferdy, it says make your own retreat. That's to Iona. Black Duncan says a beautiful place where Druids in Iona. Yes, they were. It's Ilon E in Gaelic, which means the island of the yew, although there aren't any yew trees there now. But it was also known as the island of Druids, although a lot of the stories are about Columkill, who misbehaved in Ireland, and he was banished from Ireland, and he set up a monastery on Iona, and he arrived on the island in his coracle with his monks, and they set the boats adrift so they'd never be tempted to leave. So it's interesting because there were no cattle, neither cattle nor women allowed on the island. Anyway, since changed, but yeah. So, but Gabriella says, my dad said Iona is the island of the goddess. That I haven't heard, maybe. But yeah, it's well worth being. And it's got on Ilon E, or on Duni, which is the fort of the yew. Dun means a fort. There's a well, the well of eternal youth. So,
oh right, yes, I heard that. Yeah.
So it's wonderful. So since I don't know how long you're in the order. how has Druidry supported you, or how has it kind of changed your life?
Oh, right. Well, I'm much more confident now than I was. I think age has probably got something to do with it, but I found going through the Bardic grade, I found useful because the exercises in, you know, thinking about your life and how you look at your life and how you look at your relationships and how they've affected you, and, you know, the elements help you work out, you know, where your strengths and weaknesses are and everything. I found that really, really useful, and it gave me a lot more confidence, and things started to make sense. I remember having a conversation with somebody who wasn't in the order. It was a pagan, and they were saying that you know, there was no need for all that. You know, I said, but, you know, if you came from the church like I did, with absolutely no practical experience of ritual or anything like that, you need the step-by-step, gentle but deep approach that Obod gives you. You know, because you get so much more out of it, and you know, you're not. It's not so scary, you know, as it would be going full into something else. You know, so yeah. And
because it's you know, there's so much choice involved, you know, following the path through with the order, with the course is, if this feels right for you, do it. Here's an exercise, or this is something you might like to reflect on. And I mean, I'm sure, you know, I was challenged by things right through, and it's about engaging with the challenge and making sense of it for myself, because it's you know, it's our own Druid path. The teachings provide you with a template or a scaffolding from which to build your own Druidic practice. And it's great to be challenged, you know.
unless you're challenged, you don't grow, do you? If you don't have any challenges or hardships or anything, then there's no room for growth or transformation. So,
that's right.
You know, it can be really uncomfortable, and you just have to live with the uncomfortable, because there is a, you know, benefit to it eventually, you know.
Yeah, and it's not like it would say, I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and there was a lot of, you know, mortification of the flesh and making sacrifices and little bits of penance and that kind of stuff, which is challenging. And I know, but we don't do that. It's not about penance, but you may encounter, you know, ideas or an exercise that challenges you, but you make sense of it for yourself. You know, there's no diktat. It's not something you have to do or engage in, but you're offered it. And you can if you want to. Yeah. Samantha says, I can't get to Iona, but Obod brings all the magic to my backyard. That's really nice. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many magical places, and, you know, it's wherever, I don't know where you live, Samantha, but when people talk about the great sites, but you know what? It's about finding the magic in your own garden and creating that and growing it. And by having ritual there, you raise the vibration and the energy in your own space. You know, like when you talk about seeing the dew in the grass or in the leaves, it's that you by paying attention to that, you create that magical space wherever you are. And that's what, you know, when I read Cassandra Eason's book, the modern day Druidess, that's how I found Obod. And, you know, she says you can create your own grove in an apartment in a city, you know, with a few pot plants. And then, of course, we'll work with our inner grove. That you can create that. And it's lovely, because I remember somebody saying, well, where's the best place to be all over the world, you know, for the summer solstice? And I go, well, wherever you are.
Yes.
They weren't happy with the answer. But so Samantha is in, I think you say Noosa, Australia. Yeah. But it's about finding the magic in your own landscape. And it's Natasha says, ritual helps me to remember and to belong. It feels so right, so old, and making sense of it and understanding rituals on many levels. And when understanding dawns, it's gentle and feels right and true, and offers me to stand in my truth and speak my truth. If it's in my own grove in the field, down by the sacred spring for St. Catherine, sitting with my horses in the field grove, that's exactly it. Further, it says, everywhere is a sacred site. It's just that it's more difficult to hear in some places. I think that's true. And then Owen, the Vardun, I own a yew tree. So exciting. We certainly need more linguistic awareness and review. But in Gammon, Kant, he's a traveller. It is Shrak, which is death minding, renewal, or test. And of course, the tree is the tree of death and transformation. And also, you know, from death comes rebirth. And it's also the ancestral connection. Oh, this is lovely. You're so poetic, Owen. A wild forest of nuances on nuances on nuances, layer on layer, revelation and secrecy, revealing and keeping itself. Thank you for sharing. And then John, who's in Ardnamurchan, although I'm fortunate enough to live not far from Iona, this idea of finding the magic where I live, I have found that it has rooted me in the most profound way.
Mm-hmm.
And then Thalif Stewart says, my magic is at my allotment, growing my veg flowers and listening to the wind. This is it. That's the magic.
Yeah.
And it's totally. Tea in nature. That's a powerful ritual for me. I share tea with the trees. Oh, well, Devara of Man is the best place for summer solstice, well on top of Kilimanjaro. I went to the top of Kilimanjaro. I've been there. I was there in September. No, sorry, September in 2006, I think. Anyway, but that's their winter. It'll be very cold up there. Summer solstice. Anyway. Oh, Gabriella says, I've changed my mind about the yew tree. I used to feel its vibe and not like it, but I found a lot of love in connecting with the yew. And you know, it's really interesting on first meeting, like you say, your first encounter with the fairies, it's terrifying because of whatever conditioning you have. But it's the same with people. You know, you may not connect initially with people or you feel a bit uncomfortable for whatever reason. And then by actually paying attention, you can. Like I know when I've been to workshops and I can be quite shy with new people. And it's like, I'm not connecting with anybody, you know, oh, I'm really uncomfortable. Oh my God, I hope I'm not asked to say anything, that kind of thing. And then you're getting into pairs and you're just having to chat to the person beside you. First time, it may not be much. And then as you do more and more, it's like, oh God, I'm really, really appreciating this person and getting to know them more. And I think it's the same with nature places as well. Freddie, it says the best place for summer solstice is to sleep in your bed until way. Well, the difficulty is if you're in the land of ever summer, which is we have from Finland here. So I've never been up. I haven't been to Scandinavia, or beyond, and I have no idea what it's like in midsummer there with the never setting sun. Yeah. Anyway, so what would you say, speaking of sacred sites, where is one that you know that really calls to you?
Well, it would have to be Owsley Edge, wouldn't it? Because that was the place. And the last sea group that I actually started myself, we actually used Owsley Edge as our base.
And what's Owsley Edge like?
Owsley Edge in the 1700s was described as a dreary little heath. But since then, it's been Victorianized, and they planted all the two local families planted a lot of beech and pine on it. Basically, it's a huge fault of conglomerate rock that's been thrust up. There's several ridges of this conglomerate through Cheshire, and Owsley Edge, it's got a beautiful red conglomerate sandstone in it with these pebbles, you know, from tiny little pea pebbles to big cobbles in it. And and it's got copper in it, and the copper was mined by the Romans, and it was also mined in the 1700s, which is where it got stripped and looked like a sandy heath because it was open cast. There's Neolithic mining there as well. They found Neolithic tools. You used to be able to go up there and you can just find them lying around. I think they're all long gone, but I have found Mesolithic stone flint chips up there from the camps that the Mesolithic hunters used to use, when they were following the deer and the game along. How do you know they're Mesolithic? Because I like archaeology, and I used to do field walking looking for flint, and I also had them identified by one of the guys at the Manchester Museum as well. The Mesolithic stonework is generally tiny, tiny chips of flint embedded into wood, to make the arrow. Whereas when you got further on in the Neolithic, they were actually doing the beautiful leaf-shaped arrowheads and stuff like that. So they were sort of bigger pieces.
Okay.
Yeah. I did have little. I mean, I only found chips anyway because they were where they were working them. So we used to go up there for ritual, and it's got caves where the old mine workings are, and it's just very atmospheric, but not the use. I'm not sure whether it still is, but there used to be a coven of witches. I think it was the Sanders, and they used to go up there, and on the edge itself, there's when they were sort of gentrifying it up, they'd made a druid circle. It's just a tiny little circle of stones, and they called it the druid circle, a bit like a folly. And the witches used to go up there and have their rituals around the druid stones. And there used to be a big hoo-ha because, of course, they were butt naked, sky-clad up there, and all the locals got really sort of curious. And over the years, it got really rowdy up there on Halloween. There's people wandering around with torches and, bottles and everything, got very notorious. And people used to think it had a bad atmosphere, but it's not. It's got a really wonderful atmosphere up there. I remember going up there, I think it was one Albanartham, and we'd been drumming in one of the caves, and it was still dark, and we'd stopped drumming, and I could hear bells, and these bells were wandering through the woods, and it turned out to be this huge husky, almost white husky with bells on it, obviously to keep it tracked. But it was really interesting because one of my spirit animals was a white wolf, so this white wolf with bells suddenly turned up at Albanartham. But we were up there in the cave drumming, but there was 2 or 3 other groups of people on the edge, each doing their own thing, because you could see the fires. It's a well used, well loved place. When I used to
go on, sorry.
When I first used to go, when I was young, it was really wild. You could fall off the edge if you wanted to. There was no barriers or anything. And then the National Trust in the 80s decided to tidy it up, and it got sanitized, and put on the map. And so where it used to be sort of hard to get to, hard to navigate around, and empty and wild, it's a bit more sanitized now. But if you go early or late, it's quite good. You still.
So the edge, what is that? Is that as a result of the mining, or?
No, it's the fault line. So it's the rocks get pushed up, and then it ends, and then there's you can drop down the edge, the edge of it.
Wow, brilliant, fascinating.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So Jules' cousin says, I connect to the ancestors, earth and time with clay. It's a very magical medium. After firing, it's the magic happens because you never know what will have happened in the kiln. And it's really interesting about working with clay. You're working with all of the elements.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the earth, and you've got the water that you need. You've got the air, and you've got the fire. It's a wonderful magical process. Yeah. So Ania says, summer solstice is beautiful in Finland. The night is so bright that you can easily read a book outside without a lamp. We have so much forest, lakes, and nature. And that sounds absolutely lovely. Someday, there's so many places to visit. But anyway, that sounds absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Would you type the name of this site that so it's Alderley Edge, Alderly, is that it?
Ley.
Alderley, Alderley, and then Edge.
Yeah.
Where's that? In Cheshire?
In Cheshire. Near the village of Alderley Edge, funnily enough.
Okay.
We locals call it the Edge.
The Edge, okay. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Lovely. Brilliant.
And read Alan Garner's books. They're brilliant as well. They're children's books, but they're...
Read who?
Alan Garner.
Alan Garner, I'll put that in.
Mm-hmm.
Is author. Yeah. Great. So you I know you like reading. So who's is Alan Garner one? Is he Garner or Gardner?
Garner.
Okay, I got that right. Is he who's one of your favorite authors, or who do you like?
Do you want a huge long list of who my favourite authors are? I read quite a lot, and I'm not really picky what I read. If it appeals to me, I buy most of them in charity shops. Or now I've discovered online second-hand shops. If I'm on a site or I'm on a course or something, and as someone recommends a book, I will very often see if I can get it for under £3, and if I can, I'll buy it and read it. But I used to read a lot of historical fiction, so talking about sort of when the children were young. Steve used to tell me off. He'd come in a room and I'd be reading, and then he'd go out. He'd sort of say something about not doing something. He'd go out and I'll be reading again. So in those days it was mostly historical books. So Elizabeth Chadwick, the Cad Files, Poldark, all that sort of light sort of stuff. Sharp, the Sharp series.
No.
Oh no, it's Bernard Cornwell. The Sharp, the Napoleonic. All sorts of Napoleonic books, Navy books and everything. Tolkien, lots of fantasy books. I think I read all the Eddings. Let's see what else I've been reading. I sort of worked off the fiction and then went on to Druid books, I suppose. That's when I started the crossover. So a lot of Druid books. When I first started, there wasn't that many. There was Cassandra Easton, as you said. There was Emma Restalor. She was one of the early books I picked up. And Graham Tallboys, you don't really hear from him much, but he did a lot of Druid books. So I worked through them, obviously Phillips. And then everybody else's that came along, so Christopher's and Penny's and Bonds, And then I started drumming as a drumming circle with some shamans. So I started doing more shaman work and read shaman books, fairy books. I've got 2 bookcases of fairy books, probably. And then, but at the same time, I also read a lot of books about journeys. So people that are going, doing extraordinary journeys, like cycling to Russia or something like that, something mad. Walking the Camino, any sort of pilgrim books, any long distance trails, any living in extreme circumstances. I like the idea. I like the nature in it and the observations. I love the human interactions. When they go somewhere and they have a serendipitous meeting with somebody, and or they find someone's story, or I just find it endlessly fascinating, and the resilience and the practicalities of it's so fascinating. So I like all those sort of books. I like nature books, so people writing about nature. I went through a phase of people living in Wales, Hovel Hills and stuff like that, and I bought a mountain, and then I just go. I have a huge wide range of reading materials. I even read things like not quite misery memoirs, but weight loss memoirs, because they're just so fascinating. Biographies,
And a weight loss memoir?
Yeah, people that write memoirs about losing weight.
Oh, okay.
I always want to lose weight, so how people do it, they do it. So that's interesting. It's human nature. I would say I also read a lot. I used to read a lot of Terry Pratchett, who's brilliant.
Oh, lovely Terry Pratchett.
Douglas Adams, Phil Rickman. I read an awful lot. So
Pat Booker says that Alan Gardner's latest book is great.
Yes.
And did you read it? Nimi says, did you read any Dervla Murphy's books? She wrote a lot of travel books. She's an Irish writer.
Yes.
I
think I've got one. I think I've got one on my to be read list. I think it's about the Indus. So
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything like that, Thoreau and Bill Bryson and
yes,
those sort of people, in that genre. I love stuff like that. Places I'd never get to, and places sometimes it's interesting just reading about them, how they were 50 years ago, and how they've changed, since. Nicholas Crane, he walked the entire length of the Carpathian Mountains.
Oh, wow.
So, he carries an umbrella with him wherever he goes. So it's just the eccentric people appeal to me. Yeah. Maybe I'm a bit jealous they're doing it and I'm not. I don't know. I keep saying I want to walk the North Wales Pilgrim Way. There's a North Wales Pilgrim Way now. that goes from sort of Chester all along the coast down to Bardsey, the island, and you can take a passport and have it stamped at the churches. So
How many days is it?
I think you could probably do it. Probably do it in 7 if you were very keen. I don't think I would do it quite as easily as that. So
it's interesting.
No, I was just going to say, Badger keeps saying, I think Badger, you ought to come and walk it with me.
Badger.
Yeah, Badger, come on.
Badger from Manchester.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Do you remember, I don't know if you were at the winter gathering where we had Guy and Will and they were talking about pilgrimage. Yeah. Well, Guy Haywood, he came over to Ireland last year. Philip was over as well. And he was they're talking about developing a pilgrim route called St. Aidan's Way, or the Way of the Bee, from Ferns in County Wexford. And I think it may be 5-day walk from there to Rosslare. And then you get the boat. And then you have 3 days of St. David's Way in Wales.
Yeah.
And then there's St. Declan's Way. And then there's 2 friends of mine, they developed the Bridget's Way, starting in County Louth. And then it's a 9-day. I've done 5 days of it, 9-day, and ending up in Kildare. So it's really interesting, people's journeys. I lived in the early 80s in Turkana. It's a desert in the north of Kenya. And I would see people, they were doing, this was before the trouble in Sudan. So it was actually, you could safely walk down from people doing Cairo to the Cape. Mm. And they were a guy on a bicycle with a little trailer and a dog. And he was doing from Cairo to the Cape. It's just amazing how on very, very little, just fast. You wouldn't do it now. It's just not safe. Somebody says, Gabriella says, maybe Fee can write her own book.
Yeah, it has been suggested, yes. The trouble with me is I can't decide what to write it about.
Oh, yeah. Well, bless you. You're spoiled for choice. Natasha wants to know, these works, can one ride those on horseback? I'm sure you can. I think any walking you should be able to. Yeah. And I suppose the interesting with the Camino, it starts, the pilgrimage starts wherever you are. You can, St. James's Gate in Dublin is one starting point. It's really fascinating. And I was in Prague recently, and there was a church, St. James's Church, with a magnificent organ in it, but there was a pub across the road that had all the shells. So obviously that's a starting point, the scallop shells, which is the symbol of the pilgrim. So it's just fascinating. Yeah. So, and you're a mentor.
I am, yes. I've been mentoring for 10 years now, I think.
And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I really love it. As I keep saying, I'm fascinated by people anyway. And I like to hear people's stories. And I think that's probably why I survived customer service for 20 odd years, because I've always done customer service. But yeah, so it's, I think I get more out of it than the bards and the obotes do. I learn so much, and it's just so uplifting and inspiring, actually, to mentor. So, wow, I really appreciate the opportunity. So
it's wonderful, yes. Okay, so what has been, and I'm conscious of your voice and everything else, so I don't want to keep you too long. What has been your greatest achievement, or the thing that you're most proud of in your life?
It's funny, this, isn't it? Because, sometimes when I was feeling miserable, I would look back and sort of work out what I'd done for a long time. Passing my driving test was the highlight of the achievement ranking. But, I've got a degree in English and history, so that's quite good. My greatest achievement, I don't know. If I've brought anybody any happiness at all, or have helped anybody at all, then that would be my greatest achievement.
And do you know anyone you've made happy?
Well, I hope Steve would say, yeah.
can ask him when next you see him. Oh, it's wonderful. So, do you have any regrets?
Oh, this is a difficult one, isn't it? And maybe that I hadn't been a bit more assertive earlier on in my life. I was too scared to stand up for myself in certain aspects. And I think really maybe I got shunted into things that I maybe wouldn't have done if I'd been the age I am now, you know. So yeah, I would like to have, you know, been my brain now in my 20-year-old body, really. But I think it's something you only learn over time anyway, when you get comfortable in yourself. You know, I mean, we would say about my weight and the weight loss memoirs, but you know, I used to think I was fat when I was younger, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasted all that time. I could have been wearing skimpy outfits and all sorts, you know, but no. It's funny, you hold yourself back, don't you? So, what are your thoughts?
And it's interesting about messages, you know, that you're always overweight. You know, it's kind of, even when you're not, it's that when you could always lose a few. And that's quite insidious. It's quite toxic.
I think one of the things that, actually thinking about it, that I wasn't assertive enough was I really wanted to do archaeology.
Ah, okay.
As, you know, as a career. And in our schools, you used to have to go to the careers officer, you know, when you were sort of in the process of doing your first lot of exams of the O levels at those times. And we went to the career officer and said, oh, I really want to be an archaeologist. And he looked at me and said, oh, well, you know, your grades in chemistry and something else aren't good enough to do that. And stupid little 14-year-old me, because he was an adult, and probably because he was a man, believed him. And so, of course, I didn't do archaeology, which I don't think you actually do need to have a science for, or certainly not. I mean, I got a science, I know I passed my science, you know, physics and chemistry, but I don't think you really would have needed them. And that's something that's really sort of irritated me over the years, because my life could have been a lot different if I'd done that, you know, and not done the English and history, which was very interesting and helpful, but didn't actually get me a job.
Would you consider studying archaeology now as a mature student?
I looked into it, but it was too expensive still. And when I was a child, I had the children, I couldn't have left, you know. So I mean, I did a couple of night school courses, learning about archaeology. I joined archaeological digs. I worked as a volunteer, and I joined the field walking group, which the children loved, because we used to go out at the weekend. We used to stop off at the supermarket and buy sweeties and sandwiches and, you know, bottles of pop. Go out to a ploughed field in the middle of the Peak District, meet a load of nice people, and walk backwards and forwards across the field. And of course, the kids loved it, because we were all, the adults were all picking up pieces of flint, bagging them up, and marking them with little arrows, and then they would do the GPS positioning of them, and then they could work out the scatter of the flint, because there's no natural flint in the Peak District. It all had to be brought in.
Okay.
To be used as tools. And while we were doing that, the kids were running around. Oh, here I am.
We both wrote there a minute ago.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know what that was.
Oh, it's funny, wasn't it? It's the fairies, isn't it? Yeah, so I was just saying the kids loved it, and it was really good fun. And that was the place that I learnt about the farmer's tradition of taking the trousers off and sitting on the soil to see if it was warm enough to sew. Because one day we were there and we were walking a field that had been ploughed but hadn't been harrowed. So it had huge, great big lunar up and down ridges to do it. And that day it rained and it sleeted, and we had to huddle behind a wall to eat our dinner. But when I was walking across it, I fell over and I fell back on myself and put my hands out, and the soil was warm, even with all that weather. And I thought, well, this is why I take the kecks off and put the bum on the soil to test out. It's warm. It works. You know, I've proven it. So those are really, really fun days, sort of doing that.
Just because we got cut, you were talking about when you're picking up the flint and bagging it, and then so you were saying what were you doing? Measuring the scattering? So, because
because if you can work out if it's something that they've lost because they've shot a piece, shot a game, or it's stuck in a tree or something and fallen out. It might be just one piece by itself, and it's generally like a nice saw or a part of a tool. But sometimes it's just flakes, but you can tell where it's concentrated because the ploughing over time would have spread it about.
Okay.
And it's then just to see where the settlements were and things like that. So I never actually got to do it got taken away, and the university students did all the all the looking at it and wondering what it was. We just had the fun of going out in the weather and and messing about in a muddy field. It was great.
And lovely to get your kids to do it. Jules' cousin says, I wanted to be an archaeologist, but did hard landscape gardening. Kind of similar. Now clay. So I guess that's kinder to the knees. I bet it is. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. What's the most reckless thing you've ever done?
Oh dear. I'm not very reckless. I have an annoying habit of bringing animals home to the house without asking Steve. That could be quite reckless on occasion.
So what's the most reckless animal, or what is what animal have you brought home that was...
Well, we had a dog and I wanted another dog. And so I went to the shelter and there was one left in the litter, and I hadn't told Steve what was happening. And there was one little dog left in the litter, and the lady sat her on my knee and said, "Oh, what do you think of this?" Of course, it's very nice and everything, I thought, And she said, "Well, do you want it?" So I said, "Well, yes, And she's right. Well, you take it and you tell us where you live, and then you go home, and we'll come and do a house check, and we'll be there in 10 minutes." So I had to go home and say to Steve, "Oh, there's just some people coming around with a puppy to do a house check in 10 minutes," and then run around tidying everything up, And to be fair to him, he took it really well. But I don't tend to do daredevil things at all. No, I'm quite careful.
What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for, this is part of my practice, so I always do what I'm grateful for during the day before I go to bed, because I think it helps.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody asks me what I'm grateful for, I will start off with, I'm grateful for the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth and the trees and then everything. I'm grateful for everything as much as I can be. And I try to be grateful even when I'm in a crabby mood, because I think it brings you out of it.
That's right.
Yeah. And I've learned now that when I'm getting in a crabby mood, or whether I'm feeling really het up or starting to think that everything's a catastrophe and everything's going wrong, then it's normally because I'm out of balance. So I say to myself, right, now what am I going to do? I'm going to ground myself. I'm going to ground myself, and I'm going to center myself, and I'm going to breathe, and then I'm going to look at this again now. There's something, what can I do to make myself feel better? Have I drunk enough today or whatever? So, it's paying attention, isn't it? Another way of paying attention.
I think so. Yeah. It's just some comments here from people. Philosophical Phoenix. Wow. Thank you for sharing your story, including vulnerabilities and your view of your greatest accomplishments. It's relatable and thereby encouraging, especially when fighting depression. So, and Beth says, gratitude practice really does help to retain your brain towards the positive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So powerful. Yeah. So, is there anything you change about your life?
Yes. I would like to do less of the traveling backwards and forwards for work. Well, I go with Steve. I don't really work, and more of the traveling around. We have a camper van, and we've not been out in it really since before COVID. And we used to go up to the Hebrides and Skye and the Highlands and all around England, but so we've just not been out in it. So I'd like to do more traveling again. Really, I'd like to get back into writing. I used to write a blog, and I did that for many, many years, and that sort of fizzled out around COVID. It probably fizzled out shortly after we moved to Wales. Maybe the being here and arriving and sort of being in in the place and of the land, maybe fill the need that I was writing about. I don't know, but yeah, it's still up the blog. You can still go and look at it. It's called Meadow, Grove and Stream on wordpress.com. So
Meadow.
there's pictures of you on there at the summer gatherings. We used to go to the summer gatherings.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Steve would go around and take loads and loads and loads of pictures during the ritual, but nobody would ever see him doing it. So you'd get all these pictures of the ritual, and yeah, it was quite good.
Gabriella says the blog articles could be made into a book, and I know people have done that.
Yes. I'm thinking of starting writing on Substack, actually, which is the new thing that's come out.
Okay.
It's just like a weekly newsletter, but you can have different settings. I'd set it on the free to view one. I think it's just getting into the discipline of it again. It doesn't help that I live in a very small cottage with only 2 rooms, so that I have to be by myself. If I'm better at working now when Steve's around, but I like it better when there's only me here, or I'm in a room where I can shut the door, which is impossible in here. So we shall see.
Because it's interesting, obviously, you've written a blog, and that's just kind of fallen by the wayside. And the fact that you did your newsletter, you said you 12 editions of your fairy newsletter, for a whole year, that you have a facility, and that like you're spoiled for choice in terms when it comes to topics.
Yeah, you see, I mean, but Steve has always said, ever since I've known him, you could write a book. It's a bit of a joke in our house, actually. You could write a book, when I'd come home with one and he'd look at it and say, you could have written this, But then I've got this problem of feeling that I actually haven't got anything worth saying. So it's ridiculous, but I have it. It's part of my mental makeup, as you're saying, so yeah, I just don't really just need to do it, really. I think
it's a really interesting question. Do you have anything interesting to say? And the thing is, it's about reality testing. You had people who read your newsletter on the fairies, for a whole year, and that people have followed your blog. So obviously you do. And this is what I'm doing, is reality testing. You say, well, do I have anything interesting to say? Well, certainly what you've written in the past, people have been interested in.
Yeah, I know. It's just ridiculous, but I will get over it at some point. I just don't want to leave it as late as Mary Wesley, and be 70 when I decide to start writing.
Wait, she did. Was it 70 or 75? I remember being pregnant with my son, and I read all of her books, and I was blown away. I thought, oh my God, she started at that age.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long she lived for. But I was just fascinated because this thing about, well, you reach a certain age, you're too old now. It turns that whole thing on its head, that at any age you can do something,
I think old age is a good time to start to write books, because you just stop worrying about things, don't you? Well, I do anyway.
Well, here you are now. You're not exactly old, but you're a baby old person. So yeah, it's you're able to do it, and that.
I know. I just keep putting it off. Yeah, I will do it. Yeah, I will. I've got actually a lot of books about. I also read a lot of books about writing. And, but I bought The Writer's Way. Have you heard about The Writer's Way? It's
yes.
The Artist's Way. But
Cameron, yeah,
I've not started that yet. I don't know. I like Austin Kleon. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
He's an artist and writer and journalist, and he's written a book called Steal Like an Artist, and it's all about creative inspiration and how to use your inspiration to actually produce art. So that's an interesting book. And The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield's a really good book as well. And so I am primed and ready to go. I just need to stop making excuses.
That's right. Gabriella says, we never know what's interesting because we are stuck into our obvious, and what's obvious to us may be interesting to somebody else. That is so true. And Natasha says, elders tell the best stories. Keep it up. And then Pat says, sure, how can you write when you're young? You just have to rewrite later in life when you change your mind or know a bit more. That's really true, Pat. Yeah. So What book would you like to write? If you could write a book, and if you had time, and if you could get your finger out, and do it, what book would you like to write?
Well, people always say to me, you must write a book on fairy. Well, I really don't think I've got enough to say about fairy. So maybe a very small book on fairy. I would quite like to write about, you see, I have a very full and vivid inner world. So, and I'm quite happy by myself, and I can spend a day outside and not be bored for 1 minute of it, because there's so much going on, you know, just watching the moss and watching the clouds, and so that I don't know whether I can distill that on. So I would like to write a book perhaps about making the garden, because we're working in the garden an awful lot, more than I ever thought we would be when we moved here. And it's interesting how it's developing and what's happening and what we can see. And so maybe something like that, a nature book. Or maybe how to be, I always threaten to write everything I've learned as a druid. Everything I did as a druid that worked, that sort of book. Because you know how you know how sometimes you get books on spirituality. I'm not going to just pick on druid authors now, because that's not, you know, not to bite the hand. But and they give you all these exercises to do and everything, and they just explain what they do and that. I like reading them, but I never do the exercises. And never, you know, maybe one or two, but probably I wouldn't do the exercises. And I lost the point of the thread now. So I wouldn't want to write a book like that, because the books I like, actually thinking about it, to do with spirituality, are the books that I've got on my shelves that are written by people, and this is probably what I would like to do, that just explain what they do. So I am a fairy witch, and you know, and I went down to do so and so, and I did a little spell because so and so wanted so and so, and this is happening in the garden, and that's happening in the garden, and this is happening down the lane. Just my general observations of the day, and then moving on. And then a lot of them just do it on the Wheel of the Year or something like that. And those are the sort of books that I like about magic, and the old books as well. Some of the books from the people practicing magic with a K in the 20s and 30s and 40s, you know, describing what they did. I think they're really interesting, because I mean, I like people, I like their stories, and it's about magic, and you know, so I do like those sort of things. I find those more instructional than people telling me their way of doing something. And isn't it wonderful?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's about writing the book that you'd like to read.
Yeah.
So Gabrielle, I'd love to read a book with your experience, Fee. I'd love to read about how to invite the fairy into the garden. And then Ferdiad says, everything you always wanted to know about Druidry, but were afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And there's a question by Devourer. It's off topic. How would you say heart to heart and hand in hand in Irish? Well, it's Crí go crí agus love le love. That's Crí go crí agus love le love. Anyway, but to get back to you, I mean, is there any other titles that she might, anyone else can come up with suggestions for Fee? Because I think she's needing a little bit of encouragement here.
I think if somebody said to me, you know, you've got to write a book by next whatever or else, I probably would get my act together. But when things are open-ended, I'm just dilly-dallying along, you know. There's books to read, there's plants to watch, there's, you know, there's spirits to talk to, you know. There's too much to do. Too much more important stuff to do than writing.
What's your garden like?
The garden, right. Well, we live in an old house. The house was probably built the late 1700s, probably latest 1815. We're not exactly sure. When we moved in, it had been, well, the guy before that had it before us renovated it. It had been a ruin for 100 years. It was abandoned in 1905, and he bought it in 2004 and did it up. So it's actually two agricultural labourers' cottages knocked into one. So I'm sat here now in one cottage, which wouldn't have been open plan like this. It would have been a series of tiny little rooms. Then through that door behind me is another mirror image of this, and each little cottage has got little cottage window and its own front door. So I've got 2 front doors. Now, traditional Welsh houses don't have back doors, and generally they're built into the hillside, and ours is built into the hillside. So the road's sort of up here, the other side of me. This end of the house, this little cottage has got the bathroom, this little bit we call the study, our wardrobe, because our bed's in the loft. It's what they call in Wales a crog loft. It's like imagine Heidi in the hayloft. So you go up the little stairs, and then there's a little rail, and our bed's there under the window, under the eave, so you can hear all the birds splashing around in the night and making a noise. And then in the other end of the house, there is the kitchen and what we call the living room, and it's got a little Rayburn in there. And so the walls are 2.5 feet thick.
Brilliant.
And they're made of stone, granite, because we're sat on a little cap of volcanic granite. And the house runs parallel to the road, and at the front of the house overlooks the garden. And when the guy that owned the house before Phil bought it, sold it, he just took a strip across the field and added that to the house. So we have about 50 meters in front of the house and another 50 meters the end of the last building. And then all in all, then it goes down and there's a paddock at the end. So we've got about 3/4 of an acre in all. And in front of the house, it's big boulders made into island beds. There's a stream that end of the garden that only runs in the winter or in very, very, very bad weather. And then as we go down the garden, Steve has his workshop, which is very unfair because I would like a writing studio or something. You know, he gets a big workshop. And then the orchard. And then there's what we call the paddock. And when we moved in, Phil had given up on the paddock and it was just an overgrown mess. And the sheep came in. And so we decided we had to sort that out. So we've been working on it. There's a lady actually in Ireland called Colette O'Neill. And she has a website and a YouTube channel called Bealtina Cottage. And she bought a little Irish traditional house cottage with 3 acres of land. And her land was very marshy, boggy, you know, reeds sticking up, spoilt land. And she's turned it into an absolutely wonderful forest, a wooded area.
Brilliant.
If you like gardening, go and have a look at it. And it's
Bealtina Cottage.
Yeah, Bealtina Cottage, Colette O'Neill. And it's just near in Boyle, in Roscommon. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, she's done wonderful work there. She just says one woman, you know, sort of in 3 acres, and she's just turned it into a paradise. She's a pagan. And so my ideal would be to turn the paddock into something like that. So we've been putting in, every time we find a baby tree, it gets put in the paddock. Every time, you know, we get given a tree or a shrub, it goes in the paddock. And we're making a little windbreak across there. And we've got a big vegetable patch. We've got a polytunnel. We've got fruit trees. And we've got a big wild patch that we don't mow, which we keep planting wildflowers in.
Yeah.
And really what I want to do is just get the garden looking absolutely fantastic. And that's what you say, you know, working with the nature spirits to get that. There's lots of big rocks in there that used to form part of the wall. The Welsh walls are made out of huge big blocks and stones, all built up with soil piled on top and then grass grown on the top. And lots of them have got trees and bracken and stuff, wildflowers. And at the end of the paddock, we have a green lane. So we actually have one of these walls through the end of the paddock, then another 30 foot the other side of it. And this is where they used to drive the cattle down to the marshy bit at the bottom for the grazing. So it's really a really interesting garden. The house is interesting. You know, there's it's called Ty Newyddion, which means the new houses. Or yeah, because what it is on the hill here, there's a little lane that goes down from my neighbour's place down to the sea, and it's famous in the area. It's called the Long Goid, the wood street, the wood lane, and it was made by the local estate so they could bring lime up to the fields and take peat down to the beach for exporting. And they put trees either side of it because they reckon that would drain the ground and make a metalled base for the wagons to roll on. And so we think that the cottages were built for the agricultural labourers that were working on, you know, on that. And yeah, so there was a little window on this side of the house, and the idea is that as well as being new houses, there were also the news houses, because people used to come there and talk and buy things. They used to have a side business selling things in this end of the house. And there is actually a little set of steps down from the road. It's all blocked off now that we found, which I thought was wonderful. But yeah, we've got hawthorn trees this end of the house and hawthorn trees opposite the house. So it's sort of very sort of fey anyway. And yeah, it's great. So, but I keep thinking I'm going to give it a name, and I'd like to have. We really, when we bought the house, we've got the cottage here. There's a garage that Phil bought to live in while he was doing the house up, which actually has a bedroom and a shower room in it that we don't use. And there's another building that way, which Phil built as a workshop and then converted into 2 bedrooms and a shower room. He was a bit tricksy, was Phil. And we never really used that. So we had people come to stay, but they had to go out of the house, and it was raining or dark. It was, even though it was only literally 10 foot away, people made a big deal, put the coat on and everything and go out. And of course, when the grandchild arrived, they couldn't hear the baby monitor through. So before COVID, before the baby was even an idea in the heads, we'd already decided we want to join that up to this building. So we're in the process of doing that now, but the builders are very elusive, and I've had a hole in the wall in the room for quite a long time now, and it's all take a long time. But we really wanted people to come and stay and use the land. We envisaged people coming and staying in the garage, just staying out in the other building and enjoying the land and going out and going to the seaside and up into Snowdonia. And we thought there'd be queues at the door, trying to get in to use it. But no, we've not had many visitors really. A lot of family, and we'd like people to come. And so if anybody wants to come to Wales, you're very welcome. I'll only make you work in the garden for a couple of hours a day, and the rest of the days you're
okay. So you have to pay their way. I think that's a good idea. There's some titles for your book.
All right.
Carmen says "Sacred Places Around My Land." Devourer says "Footsteps of Our Ancestors," though he thinks that might already exist. He also says "Garden of the Fae." And Lisa says "Fairy and Fee." And Devourer says through the veil into the garden. So, and Phoenix said Philosophical Phoenix would like to come one day to your garden. Okay. So you've got loads of work titles there. So it's just a matter of writing the first line, isn't it?
It is, yes. I will do it.
I know. Look forward to it. Absolutely.
Yes, I'll do it.
We're coming to the end of our time. So what is your favorite season, and what is your favorite ceremony to mark the wheel of the year? Gabriella, before you answer, Gabriella, I don't know if you're going to put in some bets. She's a gambling woman. She usually puts a few bets in. It'll be interesting to see. She says, okay, I hear that. So, somebody says, it sounds fantastic. Do you accept disabled cats that might wee everywhere?
Well, we haven't got any pets at the moment. I've not been out and got a puppy without, so we said no more dogs. So losing the dog's been very hard. And because we do travel, it's not really, we can't really have cats or anything else, or rabbits or guinea pigs. I really love guinea pigs, but it's not really fair to drag a guinea pig backwards and forwards, So we said no pets for a while. So I'm hanging, even though I'm desperately looking at puppies on the, for sale and that, I'm hanging back. A cat would be no problem at the moment.
Okay, so we've got a few guesses about what your favorite. So what is your favorite season, and what is your favorite ceremony to mark the wheel of the year?
I'm really torn about this because there's 2 seasons I like really, really a lot. And the first season that I like really a lot, which is spring. I love the Beltane energy of sort of April, May. I just love that. I love the fact that everything springs up, and you think, you're in the garden and you think, oh, well, lovely, everything's getting green, and you're feeling confident and cocky because you're on top of the weeds and it's looking brilliant. And you just know, though, in the back of your mind that as soon as the Beltane goes like that, the green fuse is lit, everything goes woof, and you've lost it. Yeah, you might as well just, you're just fighting a losing battle after that. It's the green man energy. And in ritual, I very often will make a green man.
Oh.
That's a nice way to recognize it. So yes, so I do love spring and all the different shades of green. How can there be so many different shades of green? And all the waves of color, you get the yellow flowers, don't you? And then you get all the blue flowers come through. Oh, it's wonderful. So yes, I really, really like spring. But my favorite season, but I don't know, place your bets, is autumn. And the reason for that is, well, there's quite a few reasons for that. First of all, I love the changing colours. I love the nights drawing in. There's a lot of family birthdays, including my birthday, in the season. So it seems like one celebration, and it's the new. Although I'm not particularly keen on school, I like the idea of a new start. And to me, the September term is like an extra new year. So you have like the new start of the September term. You have the birthdays coming in. My birthday's quite near Samhain, so that's quite nice. And then you have all the Samhain celebrations, and so autumn's my favourite. Oh, now you know what the favourite ritual is, don't you?
What's your favourite ritual? Tell me. I'd never guess.
Now this is going to be difficult, isn't it? Because I've written so many. So
yeah,
let's have a little think. I think probably. Which is hard. Imulk.
Okay. Well, one person said Imulk. And Gabriella says 99% of people like Samhain. And she says stats don't lie. Devara, it's Lunasa. So he did say spring, but someone said Samhain. Anyway, you've thrown them all. So well.
I'll tell you what this is about Samhain. When you do, you get the brown ritual booklets.
Yeah.
You open Samhain. The Samhain is the one that has the most stage directions in it and the most props in it. And I don't know whether that influenced my feeling about the Samhain ritual, but that's it. But when we did the Samhain in my last seed group before I moved to Wales, my previous seed group was called the Wildwood. And as I said, we're at Alderley Edge, but we're also very close to Lindo Common, where they found the bog bodies.
Lindo Man, yeah.
Yeah. So our first ceremony as a group was actually at Lindo Moss. And we were doing it, intending to do it as a one-off for a local society that we were doing a walk around the archaeological sites of the local area. And they wanted a Druid group to be on the moss performing ritual. So because they went out very early in the morning and they wanted to happen upon this Druid group. So they got us. And that was a really interesting ritual to write for non-Druids who probably wonder what the heck was happening out there. And so when we actually started practicing as a group, we would all go back to Lindo, because Lindo Moss is a very damp, boggy place with lots of water normally in Cheshire. They're called mosses in Cheshire, and it had been used for peat extraction. It was during the peat extraction that they found the bog bodies. Uh-huh. So it was huge ruts of peat, and at the bottom of the ruts was 4,000-year-old pine that was older than the bog bodies, all sort of lying around. It was very eerie and scarred. And so we used to go back there and work for the regreening, because the people that owned it said to the council that they would let them have it back and they would rewild, then we could rewild it. But they had to pass permission to have houses built on one particular part of it. And there was this big stink about it. And while they weren't getting their own way, they were doing more and more damage. And they were taking the peat out. It wasn't good enough to do composting, but they were taking it to make cosmetics, to make face cream, rejuvenating face cream. It was just astounding. Anyway, but we used to go down there for Samhain, and there used to be tracks through the peat. And one of them was at a crossroads, and we used to sit at the crossroads, and we had no ceremony at all apart from lighting a fire. And I can't see spirit, but I could feel the spirits up and down these tracks through Samhain. It was absolutely incredible. So,
Wow.
but I do like the Samhain ceremony. I've done a few interesting ones. I've done one in a natural burial ground when I came up here. Before I moved up here, I used to come up occasionally to celebrate it with Carol's Grove, the Canny Gwent, as it was. And they had a ceremony in a natural burial ground, which was really interesting. And they decided, it was a very big grove, and they decided they were going to just have people, well, druids, on each quarter, and people would take people round and they could decide where they wanted to stay. And whoever druid they stayed with, the druid would do their own interpretation of the ritual. And I got allocated west, which was great because there was a stream just down there, and I got quite a few people left because obviously it appealed to quite a lot of us. And one of the other members was going to come round as the Kaliak with a basket of apples and give everybody an apple. And then we were going to do some work and we were going to throw them to decay and do their magic. And so I was leading it, and I was looking around waiting for the lady with the basket of apples to come round. And I saw somebody walk through. Oh, she's on her way. And then she came round from the other direction. So whoever or whatever it was that I saw walk through, it wasn't the lady. And then one of the people that were with me said that there was a small child holding my hand the entire time we were there. So that was really interesting as well. So that was a very memorable Samhain. It wasn't spooky at all. I find, as I said, I used to be really scared of the fairies when I was young, and I used to be really scared about ghosts and things like that. But on the other hand, I was also extremely interested in it. And my mum, for all her, going to church and everything, she had a sideline in getting out all the scary books from the library, with all these sort of things so the house used to be full of these things, and of course I would read them and scare myself. And my mum, she's got more open with it as time goes on, but she does see a lot more than I do, but I've had funny things happen. And as I was going through the Druid course, it was peculiar because I had a really peculiar series of dreams. And what happened was that I sort of started off with like levitating. People fly in your dreams, don't you? And I was finding I was levitating when I was thinking, this is cool, I'm levitating my dreams. And then they would get more extreme. So I'd be doing different sort of esoteric things. And one dream, I had a full-on exorcism with book, bell and candle that I was performing. And I thought that was really hilarious. But ever since I've got through it, my sort of fear factor has dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped away. So now weird things happen. I was in bed the other night, and I'm here by myself quite a lot. And we have a guitar upstairs. It's Steve's guitar, and it just is. He never plays it, but it's up there, And it just went just like that. And I just sat in bed going, "Oh, that's really, really strange." I wonder what that was. But then, I just thought, well, I'll just something's mucking around with me. I'm just gonna let it be. Yeah, they can just have their fun. It's not doing any trouble.
I have spirits in my house. I hear them. I don't see them. And well, I've had to clear some who were disturbing, but others, they're there and I can hear them making noise, or I'm downstairs and I'll hear the door banging or footsteps. I think, oh, somebody up there, and then they're not.
Yeah, my auntie, Steve's auntie that lived in Wales, like in their funny little cottage that had a ghost, and their son was there. He was a teenager, and he was there by himself, and he was in front of a big roaring fire, and he noticed that there was no wood. So, being a typical lad, he kicked his slippers off like that and went outside and got the wood and brought it back in. And when he got back in, his slippers were placed in front of the fire together very neatly. So apparently he just disappeared into his bedroom, and that was it. It didn't come down, but that did put me off visiting a bit, but
Wow,
it's so fascinating, though, isn't it?
Wonderful, tidy spirits. So listen, it has been just such a joy talking to you, Fee, and really, really enjoyed it. And I didn't think we were going to last this long because of your cough, but it's great when getting onto an interesting topic, how whatever it is, the fairies or the spirit conspires to help you talk and converse. So
I didn't want them to help. I didn't expect them to give me a coughing fit, and I'm sorry about that, but I do feel okay.
Oh, yeah. A philosophical Phoenix says, I never see or sense indoor spirits, only outdoor ones. Julia says, I'm so glad your voice held out. It was such a fun evening. So, yeah, and it's just some lovely comments about what you've shared. So, well, a lovely conversation. Thank you. I'm so glad you're. That's lovely. Oh yeah, Nimi says I'd love mine to tidy up a bit. Yeah, it would be really nice. So would I. I could do with a lot.
They do say that brownies do tidy up in the house, but I think it's esoteric cleaning. I think it's on a different level than mundane cleaning. Certainly in my house, anyway.
I take both. Poppy says, thank you to both of you. Blessings to you. And I love the fairies. And Carmen says, I love the fairy stories as well. And Devara has a remedy for your cough. Boiling water, honey, ginger, squeezed lemon. Perfect for cough and throat.
Oh, I've got all those.
It's a lovely conversation. So
the thing is that because I'm here by myself, I've got nobody to talk to. You know, sometimes I'm here for days and don't see anybody. And then if someone comes to the door, like they come to test the water, the poor guy's stuck at the sink, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm turning into an eccentric woman. I must stop talking at him now and leave the poor man alone. But so I wasn't expecting it. You know, I thought I was okay, but obviously not quite as good as I thought.
So Anita says, thank you for such an interesting conversation. Fee was a great guest. She wasn't. You were indeed. Perfect talk about the fairies. Thank you. It was delightful and fun. It's blessings and love to all. Thank you. So I really enjoyed listening, Fee. Your home and garden sounds fantastic. Pat says, cough remedy for people who don't have to worry about others in the house. Stick an onion in your sock.
Would it make it hard to walk?
Absolutely. Robert Jones says, lovely chat. I can see the fairies cheering. Talk to the fairies, Poppy says. It might help as well. So I just let you say good night, and then I'll send you back, and then we can just look at the comments. So I'll let you say goodbye first, and then I'll say goodbye.
I only wish that I could actually speak to, we could have a conversation and we could speak all together. That would be great. But thank you for having me. And it's been lovely.
Great. Okay. So I see you in a few minutes. So thank you all for coming. And I know some of you said you missed last week. I went on to Cornwall after the summer gathering. So 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready I was in Glastonbury getting ready. Next week, I won't be here either. I'm afraid I will be in the Netherlands for the Dutch Obod gathering. And then the following week, the 29th of June, I won't be here either, but we will be doing, this is for Obod members, the Obod meetup, the Zoom meetup for members. We're not able to do everything on Saturdays because most weekends are gone now. So hopefully those who are members of the order can join. And then it'll be the 5th of July. I think that's whatever the first Thursday in July, I will be back with a guest. So in the meantime, be well. And just to remind you, we will be having our summer solstice ceremony at 7 o'clock this Saturday, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And then, of course, next Wednesday is the 21st of June. So wishing you all the best and much light and I'm really enjoying the weather here. We don't always have great summers. So I'm not complaining. And so we're just wishing you all the best and hopefully maybe see you on Saturday online and then further chats. So in the meantime, be well, whether you're watching a recording of this. So I wish you good evening, good night, good morning, or good afternoon. Until we meet again, slán go fóill.